just the
It looks
aesthetics of
better.
it. Yeah. All right, so we are live with episode number 21 with Zain. Zain, what's up?
What's up? Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for coming through. Thanks for being patient. I
Absolutely.
promised myself the last episode I wouldn't I wouldn't say that finally we're live, because if you look back to every episode, I start that episode saying finally we're
Oh,
live.
really?
Because the guest sits there and watches me, suffer and frustrate over getting this set up. And you would think that after doing it 20 times that you would get the hang of it, right? That you would get the gist of it, or you would, have it all pinned down, but I don't know why I don't. But anyways, what do you think about World War III?
Whoa. Wow.
Started off very lightly.
Straight out.
Very
Okay. What do I think about World War? What don't I think?
What don't I think? Like, what can you think about?
I don't know. I think it's interesting. I come from a Middle Eastern background, actually.
Oh, really?
So I've been seeing both sides of kind of the reactions.
Mm-hmm.
I think the memes is one thing, and then there's a reality that you kind of forget about.
Mm-hmm.
Not only forget about, but a lot of people just don't know about it.
Or choose to ignore.
Choose to ignore. I also think like meme culture
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't allow the gravity of such horrible things to actually come to light.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We got World War III. We got Australia. There's a lot of stuff going on.
I think 30% of all koalas have been extinct now.
Yeah.
I think, which is
It's
insane.
ridiculous.
Insane.
Yeah.
Like in that short time period. But what you said is very important. The whole like looking at both sides of things, because I think that especially now in this culture, people don't really give a fuck about empathizing with the other side. So people just want to control the narrative, if you will. Like it's kind of a struggle of who controls the narrative. So to them, maybe them seeing all those U.S. soldiers embarking on planes to go overseas and to enter the Middle East and to fight for freedom and to fight for democracy and to fight for all these rights that they proclaim that they're, trying to take to these developed cultures that they claim to be subdeveloped, like third world countries or whatever. Like that's their narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's our narrative. It's like we're the heroic people that bring freedom and bring justice to others. But if you flip the coin, like people in the Middle East are probably looking at us as terrorists. It's like, oh, like these are terrorists embarking on these planes, coming here to impose their ideologies and stuff. And that's why I don't really like to get really political, because it's very hard for you to like establish a position in like any topic, any occurrence. It's like, I don't think anyone's ever right, if you will. It's kind of like the person you deem to be right is the person that is more conveniently in frequency or aligned with your interests and what you want in your agenda, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then there's the meme culture, which just exacerbates the whole issue and kind of tries to make light of it. And I think that says a lot about who we are as people now. It's just like you said, like instead of letting something or shedding light on a topic, having a discussion about it, trying to understand the depth of that topic, we kind of just deploy humor and comedy to kind of cope with it. It's a coping mechanism. Like Twitter is a coping mechanism.
Absolutely.
But I will say that Twitter lately has been the funniest. Like, it's not something that you should really laugh at, but the way that people use memes and stuff about being deployed and just, it has been a very funny place to be, I will admit. Like, it's been hilarious. But then when you look at the actual, the reality of things, it's anything but funny.
Mm-hmm.
And it all started with a tweet. I don't know if you saw. It was Donald Trump. He tweeted something about Iran being held responsible for any injustice done towards American soldiers in the Middle East, and then the Iranian leader kind of retweeted it and just insulted his ego, and then that's what led to him authorizing the drone strike.
Twitter warfare,
which is crazy, dude. Like, think about like we have a president that is willing to start a war over damaged ego type of thing.
I mean, I think
which is insane.
It's hard to talk about it so quick after it's all happening.
Because it's still developing.
It's still developing.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at kind of like the bigger picture and you step back even beyond the president and you know, foreign political decisions, I think it talks about our society, like you said. And I think what you said about memes being a coping mechanism, this is something that I actually have have had an opinion developing over the last few years. And I think it talks a lot about kind of like the things that are sellable, right? Like the things that you know will generate the retweet or the like or the repost. And that's something that we as consumers engage with, whether it's brands that you know, post things that are triggering or they post things that are you know, actively trying to get you or to actively trying to play into the things that they know you're going through as a generation even, as opposed to like kind of tweeting things that that actually might help people. You know what I mean?
To people, yeah.
And this is something that I actually have been interested in personally over the last few years. Is kind of like, how do you take that culture? How do you take that? I don't want to call it the meme culture. I mean, there is the meme culture, but what I'm talking about is not necessarily that. It's more, how do you take this kind of the nature of social media, the volatility of it, right? How do you take that and actually use it for good? How do you take that and actually teach people with it? How do you help people learn? How do you help people see the big picture, right? How do you allow this kind of viral nature of thought benefit everyone?
And just kind of channel it in a beneficial, valuable form. And just use it as like a vessel to transmit or to take knowledge to people, give them positivity, give them laughter or something.
Exactly.
There's this book that I recently read. I forgot the name of the book, but it talks about viral videos and viral content. So again, going into business, you have to be very in tune with all of the trends, all of the, you know, topics that people are interested in, and you kind of have to, just like you said, convert that and channel it to your benefit, but in a way that benefits others as well, because you have to make a profit. You want people to engage, you want people to kind of come through your door, but you can do it many ways, and not many businesses understand that you can give people value for value. So businesses kind of just want to take. So I think that the new generation of business is exactly what you said. It's finding a way to use this evil, quote unquote, and kind of convert it to a common good, right? So to me, like, honestly, I think that, because I have my opinion with social media. Like, I think that it's a good and it's also a bad thing. Like,
absolutely.
If you take it, like anything else, if you take it to one extreme or to the other, you'll have a variety of different, you know, positions and points that you can raise, whether it's good or bad. But I think that for business and for branding, it's something that you just have to be careful of, like, what your intentions are. Because if you open, or if you start a brand and your solemn intent is to build a following and to be famous, for example, right? What's the point of that once you've accumulated 1 million followers? Like, what do you do then, right? So if you set out with an intent of, like, giving people value, I think you'll be more capable of exceeding 1 million and going to 10 million and going whatever. So if you just, like, don't prioritize the things that everybody else values, and you find value where there's not much of a niche anymore, like, or yet, I don't know if that makes sense, but then, like, it's kind of finding the pockets of value that people aren't really investing in. So people have this antiquated mindset, especially in business world, especially in just any industry. It's like the way that works, just keep it that way, kind of thing. And that leads me to actually asking you about it's Zulu Echo, right?
Zulu Echo Initiative, yeah.
So what's that all about? Because I'm really into not really into it, but I respect fashion as a form of artistry. It's like, to me, it's a form of art. So I've learned to actually view things that I wouldn't really associate it with being a form of artistry. And now I think through development and through maturity, you start to, like, realize that, for example, like, this water bottle is a form of art if you appreciate it as a form of art, kind of thing. So it's kind of like the approach that you take on anything. So that's fashion, architecture, interior design, things that I would overlook. Now I just look at it, I'm like, oh wow, like that's actually, there's like more to it. Kind
Absolutely.
Of thing. So what's the whole like,
what is the Zulu
story?
Echo Initiative?
Yeah, story
wow,
behind
what
it.
a big question.
What a big question. Or at least like how did you start it?
Yeah,
like, what was the initial development?
I think this is gonna sound cliche, but I mean it to the kind of root of my core. The short answer is Zulu Echo Initiative is a movement.
Okay.
It's a mindset. It didn't start as a clothing brand. I don't see it continuing as just a clothing brand. It actually started almost 3 years ago now. Freshman year of college, I just kind of realized for the first time in my life that I was enjoying working hard. I was enjoying putting in the hours. I was enjoying staying up late, getting things done. I was meticulous about detail. I just realized that, and this is the first time I had realized this, and the first time that I'd actually noticed myself enjoying working hard.
That's interesting.
And I did well in school. I did fine in school, but it was never like, I was never at the top of my class. I was, just, I got by well, but I could have done a lot better.
So you were pursuing architecture?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I started architecture, like first semester in, it was the hardest semester of my life in terms of academic kind of challenge. And again, it was also the first time where I was like really driven, And I asked myself, I got to like maybe 2-3 months into that semester, I asked myself why. I asked myself, why am I enjoying it so much when it's actually so hard? And I just kind of had this moment where I reflected and I said, it's because this is what I love. This is what I'm passionate about. This is what I have always wanted. And now I'm here. Now I have the opportunity to do the things that I've always wanted to. Anyone who knows me knows that since I was young, I've always wanted to be an architect, and I always wanted to go to architecture school. But obviously, when you're in middle school, I mean, those things are kind of like they're distant visions. You know what I mean? They're desires. They're not yet manifested. And then I knew I had to work hard to get into architecture school, and I did, and I got in, and that's when it hit me. And so when I realized this, I wanted to share that. At the same time, I noticed other people that I had gone to high school with who were also like veering off of what we had all expected them to be and just start doing something with this ridiculous amount of drive, ambition,
and they were on the same frequency level as you were.
And it was so unique because these are people that I used to sit down in class next to, and I had no idea that they wanted actually to start a fashion brand. No idea. 6 months out of high school, they were making progress towards that. Wow. And that was just for me super inspiring. And I wanted to find a way to celebrate that moment, to really kind of like highlight for people at this age where it's kind of like, holy shit, you can do it.
Shit. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this is the time to kind of grab life the way you want, the way you've always wanted to kind of go through it and pursue that. So the Zulu Echo Initiative was born from a way of me to kind of help tell that story for other people. But it was also a way of me sharing my passion with the world. Okay. So at the time, it was architecture and fashion, design, things. I used to do kind of like analyses of projects, like architectural projects. Okay. And it wasn't on a consistent basis. It was more of just like I knew for my own drive, I needed a space where I could just post passion, whether it was mine, whether it was other people's. So there's a portion of the movement called Friends of Zulu Echo, and these are people that I've met over the years or who I've known since I was younger. That's dope. And each of them is there with a little blurb about what they do, the brand they started, the music they started making.
What drives them, what's their passion.
Exactly, with a link to all their socials, all their websites and stuff like that. So it became kind of this archive of like people that are manifesting their passions into the world. And I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. We've all seen it in certain scenarios where you can talk to somebody and hear about what they're doing, and you can just tell that
right off the
to
bat.
Their core, they are so happy
15
doing what
seconds
they do.
in. 15 seconds.
And that for me is like a super contagious feeling. Like when someone else is super happy doing something that they do, there's two ways you can respond. You can either respond by kind of just like adding on to their excitement and kind of helping them realize that, yeah, like this is what you need to be doing. But then there's also the people who are kind of like, well, like that's not me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm not doing something, And I wanted, and I think that this is like a societal thing, goes back to how we started about whole meme culture, is like we don't actually celebrate proper achievement, right? We celebrate the things that are sellable. And in many ways, success isn't sellable as a self-success, right? Like interior success isn't sellable. You can't tell somebody like, oh my God, I had a great day today. And then have that go viral.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean?
It's only if you buy a Bugatti, if you buy a Lamborghini.
If I made 10 million today, that could go viral. Yeah. So Zulu Echo Initiative grew with me in that sense. And what I wanted to do is I had this moment where it was like, yeah, I was talking about my passions, but this was something that I wanted to represent everyone's passion. So that's when I moved towards it being a clothing brand and saying, the way I see the clothing brand is you have a favorite sports team?
I don't have time to follow sports, but Giants.
So you see somebody wearing a Giants jersey. What's the first thing you think?
He's a part of my tribe.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how I see the clothing brand.
Yeah.
And for me, that's something really unique because I was never, ever expecting that to be the next step for Zulu Echo Initiative. I would never thought that it would become a clothing brand. I was interested in fashion in my own sense, in the kind of sense where it was like I'm posting pictures of styles that appeal to me, the things that I wear, stuff like that. But to actually put this mindset on something that you can identify with and wear and know that you're part of something bigger, that was kind of where the clothing brand came from. And then it's just grown into this movement where, I work with artists, I work with young entrepreneurs, I work with DJs, musicians, all over the world now, to tell that story, to tell their story of their struggle, their passion. And some of the growth that I've seen in the people that I've worked with, has just been so inspiring. Yeah. People that, like I said, I went to high school with, that when we were in high school, we were nothing special, and then they graduated and they just, boom, 2 years in, they're getting booked for music festivals.
People like close to you.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's like that level of separation between you and Kanye West, or you and Virgil Abloh, and you and whoever. And then if you've literally sat through a history class with someone that's 3 chairs away from you, it's like, oh shit. It just humanizes the whole experience because again, we see success as this unattainable, unpalpable, materialized form of reality that's not sustainable at all. So I find it like fascinating how you actually took the initiative of offering a platform for other people to kind of curate and develop and kind of inspire them to be inspired to inspire others kind of thing, right? And I think that that's the most powerful form of growth because just like you said, you can look at it 2 ways. You can look at it like, oh shit, like that person's passionate, so I'm like gonna help them, or I'm gonna like be inspired by that person. So you can be inspired by an inspirational person, or you can be what's the word I'm looking for? You can be
you can look inside, right? To like look.
You can look inwardly and then feel kind of like, all right, so that person's inspirational. That person is aspiring to achieve great feats. That person is ambitious. That person is this and that. They're growing. They're working towards their goals. But I'm not.
Yeah.
So instead of you looking at why isn't Zain working towards his goal, you'll look at someone else and say like, fuck that person. That person has to be like me. And then basically your mind does this thing where it breaks down these people and kind of tries to make them level with you so that you can easily cope with yourself and your reality and you can sleep well at night. So that's where hate comes from. Hate is getting Kanye West and not viewing him for his accomplishments, but trying to find every meticulous fault. And then with each fault, he kind of degrades on the hierarchy scale of your mind type of thing until he's at the same level as Callie and Zain. And now we can sleep better at night. So like that to me is what hate is. It's like your mind breaking down people. So what you do is very rare. And that's actually something that I've said to every guest on this podcast. Because just like you said, like you can tell by not even like having to meet someone nowadays. Like you can tell by their profile on Instagram, on their stories, on what they produce. So you can tell like what that person's intentions are. And every guest that I have on this podcast, like I make sure to only invite people who I really feel inspired by. Like people who I feel like can have like this, but like if you have, I don't know, how many followers do you have?
Just shy of 3,000.
3,000. So I look at your 3,000 followers, for example, I'm like, why doesn't he have 3 million? Because this content and this
asking myself the same question, man.
this mindset, the blogs and articles that you write, it's like, you can tell that there's more, like if it was only for likes and clout and girls and parties and money and whatever, like you wouldn't be putting in this effort or this amount of passion, because you can't really feign passion. I feel like that's a big thing. You can pretend that you're passionate about something, right? For a date, for a short relationship, for a business relationship, you can pretend that you love the Giants. You can research, before a big meeting with someone that you're trying to impress, and you know all the statistics and stuff. But long-term wise, like you won't be able to sustain that passion because it's not real.
Right.
So it's kind of like this facade that's not founded on anything substantial. And speaking of facade, it's like, to me, what just blew my mind is like, if you think about it, architecture is designing something that will resonate or be the extension of someone's personality, right? Like that's something that I learned with interior design. So if you look at a celebrity's home, the small little details of like small little rooms and the material chosen, and like, oh, this sofa's from the villages of the Congo because that's where my ancestry is from, or whatever, or this. It's like all of these small little details are like extensions and representations of who that person is. And then the fact that you were studying architecture and then you kind of just organically deviate, well, not even deviated, you just organically
In parallel,
went into fashion, which is the most visual form of extension. It's like what you wear represents who you are, kind of thing. And it goes into that whole like, don't judge a book by its cover. But I'm against that saying, because you have to judge people. Like that's something that people don't really like, they might take it the wrong way. But what I mean is like, you don't have time to build a repertoire with every single person you meet. So if you're walking down Times Square, you're judging people by the way that they look, like immediately judging them. Like it or not, you can say that you're the most selfless person. Like, no, I don't judge anyone. It's like a primal thing. Like you have to judge people because it's just survival instincts. It's like you have to see if they're a threat, if they pose a threat to you, your family. So walking down like Times Square and you're wearing that shirt, just by that hoodie, for example, or the black one that you have that's really dope. It's I'm only getting started or something like that.
Yeah,
I find that one like sick as fuck. So you're like walking down with that shirt. I can make certain assumptions about your personality. What you can't do, in my opinion, and what I don't do, and I always police myself to make sure that I don't, because it's easy for you to do this, is like basing off of that assumption, you make a concrete assessment of that person. Like you shouldn't do that. So just because I made an assumption, that's just me kind of making sure that you're not like a psychopath or you're not like a fucking serial killer.
Yeah, it's the first reaction.
Whatever. Yeah, it's the first reaction.
Yeah.
So to me, it just blew my mind. It's like you went from like architecture, which is like basically like a representation and an extension of like who you are through design and through lines and through, your home basically, or, the aesthetics of the building or whatever space that you confide yourself in. And then you went to clothing, which it's just a crazy transition to me. Like that's fucking fascinating.
I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, Virgil Abloh is an architect.
Right. He
studied architecture.
Artist too, right?
He's
like a painter or something.
He's off-white designer now, but like
Louis Vuitton too.
And I think like you see this throughout. Like Zaha Hadid is a super famous architect, and she's a phenomenal designer all around. But I think like this tie between, I think architecture specifically, and this is one of the things that drew me to it so much, is the fact that it's, we don't necessarily know this, but everything that we feel through life is influenced by architecture. So when you're walking through a street, if you don't feel safe, that's because of architecture. If you feel like this is a space you can relax, that's because of architecture. So the power that architecture has to actually influence how you experience the world, for me, is one of the most powerful things about what I study, and that's one of the reasons that I'm drawn to it so much, because architects have such a big responsibility in that regard, right? So I think like making that transition from architecture to fashion, it wasn't necessarily that I decided, okay, architecture can't do what I need to do. Let me put it on a shirt.
Yeah, no.
For me, it's more so it's kind of like, okay, as a designer, as a thinker, because I think architects are also some of the most. If you sit down with an architect for an hour, they will pick your brain theologically. But I think one of the most interesting parts of being kind of exposed to that way of thinking is that it's a problem-solving thing, right? So if I identify the problem being that people don't have the confidence to follow their passion in life, I use for myself an architectural method of thinking to kind of give me a solution on how that could, how I could shift that, how I could push that.
Kind of like a framework.
Exactly. I think and I actually have written an article about this, but there's this practice that we do in architecture that's it's called diagramming. It's very similar. We do it in everything, but architects use it as a design tool. And you used the word facade before. What diagramming does for us is it takes the facade off the building. It allows us to understand relationships in the building. It allows us to understand sequences of spaces. It allows us to understand interactions of people at different floor levels, right? So diagramming moments of a building becomes super, super important to the overall design of a project. And for me, that method is super easily translatable into everyday life. And this is kind of how I dissect anything that comes across as a challenge in my life. Is I try to look at the big picture, then I try to diagram a little bit of it here, see what that relationship is to some other problem that I've had. Maybe I've done this before. Maybe I've, maybe this is an opportunity for something new to happen. So in that sense, like architecture for me is not just about buildings. It's not just about sitting there and drawing. It's about really understanding problem solving.
The inner dynamics of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Dude, that just blew my mind. Like the diagram model of thinking, like that's so true because then you like, even if you have two incongruent things that just are completely opposites, you can place them together and then you'll find an intersection where they kind of like have that, where that dynamic kind of impedes on the territory of the other. And then you'll find common ground. And then you can apply that to politics, religion. That's such a dope way of looking at things.
I think also like for designers, the most exciting part is when there's no common ground, because that's the opportunity to design.
You can create it.
Right. And that's the opportunity to really step back and say, all right, there's these two things that have no relationship to each other, but for us to progress, we need to create a relationship.
How do you
do that? And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with in terms of kind of self development and kind of the actual pursuit of goals and accomplishing goals. It's like they view them as two different things. And I know this because I've done this before, and this is like something that I
think everybody has done. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's kind of like a natural thing. It's kind of like like you said before, like we shy away from unfamiliarity, right? One of the values that I hold dear to my heart is putting myself in situations I'm uncomfortable with, because they provide me with an opportunity to grow. And grow and learn and just experience things that I'm not literally comfortable with. And actually, one of the things that I've created as a designer, as an artist, is this canvas print with one of a photo that I made. It's kind of like this one right here, and it's this quote about being uncomfortable and the importance of being uncomfortable and the importance of using actual uncomfort as a driving force for discovering who you are. And 100%. Seeing how you react to situations you're uncomfortable with, right? So if you shy away from something you're uncomfortable with, that says a lot of things about you, right? One, it could mean you're just not interested, and that's totally fine. It could also mean that you personally have a kind of hard time confronting things that are hard. So when a business challenge comes along, when you're put in a situation to make a decision that you're not quite comfortable with, right?
It's fight or flight.
Right. And that's not, for me, a kind of healthy mental place to be when you're making decisions like that, right? So I think the practice of just kind of putting yourself in situations where you are learning to mesh two things that are not necessarily compatible it really grows your mind. It grows your ability. It exercises your problem solving tactics, right? Yeah. And that, going back to architecture, is what it really is all about.
Yeah.
Right. I think, and this is like, it's unique, and this is my opinion in architecture, but just looking at different buildings, you can tell buildings that are really trying to stand out from the environment that they're in, or you can tell buildings that are so blended into what they're around that you can almost see them.
Yeah.
And you can go through life kind of looking at yourself that way too, right? So there are some people that are perfectly happy with just kind of blending in with what exists, and that's totally fine. There's no criticism of that. And there's the other people who want to stand out, whether it's and then the decision of the motivation behind standing out is another thing, right? But the actual desire to stand out, right? That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Because it means you have to go against the grain.
Yeah.
It means you have to be an outlier. And that process of being okay with being an outlier, I think, is something that our generation has a lot of trouble with.
And isn't comfortable.
It's not comfortable.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll tell you this from personal experience. Like, when I started Zulu Echo Initiative, I had no idea where it was going. And to a degree, I still don't know. And it's a process. Yeah. But I kind of got over that bump. I got over that initial kind of like, what the hell are you doing? You know? And now it's more of kind of like, all right, well, what's next? Like, what's the next step?
What's the next step?
And every time I do produce something new, it is a moment of kind of like, I'm uncomfortable doing this. Let me learn it better. Let me study up on it. Let me try and find a way to make it happen. And that kind of ties into the whole thing of like, when you want to be an outlier, the nature of being an outlier will push you to discover new things about yourself. And that for me is a beautiful process, because when people do that, then they actually show you who they are.
Yeah.
And that's what we need more of in the world.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, one of like the most frustrating things about the society we live in is, for a lot of people, I won't say the majority, for a lot of people, when you do go to show the world who you are, there's always this like, well, what's people's reaction going to be?
Yeah.
Right. And this goes back to the meme culture thing. It goes back to the social media and all that stuff. And this is where you had said earlier, like, there's a benefit to social media, both good and bad.
This is one of the bad ones.
This is one of the bad ones, right? But I think the fact that it exists as a bad one means it's possible to exist as a good one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you can tackle that, if you can say like, okay, I know that people are going to judge me when I post something.
You can use it to your advantage and leverage it. Yeah.
Either that, or you can like the fact that you already identified that that's a problem, right? That you already know you're going to be perceived in a certain way, means you can decide how you're going to react to that.
And how you're going to solve it.
Right.
With it. Yeah.
And that for me is like the power that social media actually has.
Yeah.
I think one of the best practices anyone can do, and I know like this is not my idea. People have been doing this for a long time, but for the people who haven't heard this before, I think one of the best things you can do is to go through the list of people you're following and ask yourself if the button that says follow was replaced with learn from. Would you still tap it?
Oh, that's dope. Yeah.
And you really ask yourself, is the content, because we just live in a content-driven world right now, and is that content that's helping you?
And is it worth following that person?
Right.
Because if it's negative, you know, content, that's
exactly.
not worth it. Yeah.
Exactly. And if that content is not helping you, not only are you wasting your time, right, but you're actually propagating a culture from which you are struggling too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because you're feeding that machine, right?
Exactly.
So you're like motivating and incentivizing that person. Oh, like one more follower, so that person likes it. Yeah.
The next step then is also kind of understand, like, tied to this learn from thing is why are you following them, right?
Yeah.
There are some people that you won't learn from, but for whatever reason, there's like, they teach you, they don't teach you, but you're interested. You're just interested in their life.
They
right?
make you laugh, or they make you whatever.
Like we all follow that one meme account that we always send to our friends.
One or a few ones.
Or a few,
a few ones.
Yeah. But I think like the nature of social media, like the power that it has to really just give you a kind of like summary of all the things that you're interested in. Like at a certain level, you need to curate that to every last account. Right? Like you need to be able to, and like algorithms, of course, come into this, and it's not always like you get to see the things you choose, but for the most part, if you can select what accounts you align your visions with and what things you follow, you're already on a better track.
Yeah.
I think in a really almost ironic way, a big part of how I think now about life comes not only from the conversations that I have with people, but on the people that I actually engage with on social media. Something that I kind of did for myself as I started this kind of creative journey was I started following more and more artists, whether it was musicians, videographers, content creators, fashion designers, stuff like that. People where they're actually using social media not as a place to necessarily socialize, but it's actually a visual representation of their passion. That inspires the crap out of me. Like I just like when I sit there, you can look at a page and say, this person is not just super talented, but this is them. You know what I mean? Now there are obviously there are dangers with that. You know, there are dangers where it's like you go to an account, it looks beautiful,
and then you try to compare yourself.
Yeah, either you try to compare yourself or you make assumptions on that person. You know, where it's like
picture perfect life or whatever.
You know, And I've done this before. I've done this before, and I've also been on the account side of it. Like I've been that person who posts like I'm fine when in reality I'm not. And that's then a conversation you have to have with yourself. That's where
that's a learning curve because you have to go through those steps.
Right. That's where reflection comes in. That's where being at a place in your life where you can actually sit down with yourself and like look at the big picture and again diagram your relationship to all of these outlets, these you know, whether they're social media or whatever it is, you diagram your relationship to those things.
And do you know I think it was Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer said that any new form of truth, so that truth can be, for example, if you establish and tell yourself every day in the morning, and you believe in yourself and you kind of try to feed yourself with self-belief, which is essential, and it's what a lot of people don't do, because just like you said, a lot of people will look at a profile that inspires them, quote unquote, but they'll feel intimidated by it, and then that kind of unmotivates them from their own objectives and their own grind and their own journey. So again, it's just the evil of comparison, right? So comparison is the thief of joy, kind of thing. So Schopenhauer says that every truth, be it personal truth, be it universal truth like gravity, be it whatever it is, has 3 steps of entering a culture or entering a society, entering a community. So it starts with, first, it's ridicule. And to me, creativity is the ability to endure ridicule. It's the ability to be punched in the face various time, accept it, even welcome being punched in the face. It's like not letting that unmotivate you and, you know, deviate you from the path that you're setting out to traverse. And then you have the strong opposition towards it. So like that's what I see a lot in social media, and you can apply these 3 steps to social media itself. So like if you wake up one day and you're inspired by, I don't know, let's say Virgil, and you want to start a shoe brand, or you want to start like a street clothing brand or whatever, and then you announce that on your social media, you'll have a number of people who they may present to you like they're supportive and they're happy for you, but maybe behind closed doors amongst their other circle of friends, they're like, oh, I have this one friend, he's out of his mind, he thinks that he could start a clothing brand or whatever. And sometimes there are more blunt people who skip that phase of trying to put this facade of, you know, motivating you and kind of pushing you and saying like, yeah, go you, and they'll tell you straight up like, are you crazy? Like, have you thought about this? Do you know what the likelihood of your clothing brand of like actually? So I've actually gotten that with the whole gym thing. It's like, why do you think that you are in a position to open a gym in a already super saturated environment industry? There's gyms opening every single week, basically every single corner there's a gym opening. Like, why do you think? So if you let that get to you, then it kind of feeds your imposter syndrome, which I think every innovator, every entrepreneur, every person that tries to deviate from the standards and from the, you know, status quo, just like you said, they have to be crazy enough to kind of be ignorant towards those comments and those people and those criticisms. So it's ridicule, people will laugh. Then it's oppressive resistance. It's like the people that were laughing, once you, I don't know, you attend a fashion show and then you take a picture with Virgil, and you're granted like a 15 conversation with them, and then you document that on social media. First person that laughed at you, now they'll start transitioning into like more straightforward criticism. It's like, oh, like 15 minutes won't make you the greatest guy. You know, like they'll start nitpicking at like your accomplishments, even though you've jumped substantially. Like you're actually meeting with Virgil now. Like you're sitting down with him, you're having coffee, you're doing a podcast with someone else or whatever. You're working towards your goal. And then it's just strong opposite, oppressive resistance kind of thing. And then that's social media just like makes that 10 times worse than it actually is. So then there's comments, negative comments or whatever. And then the last form is just, the last step is accepting it as a known truth. So once you reach a point where you're an owner of a successful clothing brand, or you're a renowned architect and you're respectful in every industry that you just get yourself into, and you're just talented, and like people can't question it anymore. So people can't question Virgil Abloh's talent. No one can, I don't think. Like people can criticize it, but you can't question the fact that the man is talented, you know, like based on where he's gotten in life. And I think that social media, again, the biggest evil of it is just that it's like it can inspire you, or it can just completely destroy your self-esteem. It's like looking at Virgil and comparing yourself, and it's just not good. And there's one thing that I wanted to connect with this with, that you said. Hold on, let me just find my train of thought. This happens. It's normal. It's about resistance. Virgil Abloh. I'll try to remember it later, and if I do, I'll just get back to it. But so, do you still? So okay. Do you want? Like obviously you can do both, but if you were to get into a point in your life where you had to make a choice between either going down the architectural path or going down the creative clothing Zulu Echo path, which one would you choose if you had to choose only one, and the other one would have to just be left in the past as like an experience?
I think my parents would be very happy that you asked that question. That's a question I've been asking myself for a long time.
Yeah, and it's a hard question. It's hard to answer.
I think I would rather go down fighting to keep both and tie them together.
Okay, yeah.
Than to choose one over the other.
Yeah.
Because
of the diagram
the
thing
diagram.
too, right?
It's the diagram. And that's what I was about to say. It's the two things that don't seemingly have a relationship. My nature as a creative is to find a way to make that happen.
To look at from a macro perspective.
And then design the crap out of every single detail between.
Yeah.
So I personally believe there's a really strong opportunity for architecture to have a voice in empowering people. And it already does. In many ways, it already does. What I would love to dedicate my life to, and that's kind of what I'm trying to build up right now, is this really strong relationship between the two, between everything Zulu Echo Initiative represents, which is for me way more than just the clothing brand. Yeah. I mean, when I tell people what I do, I don't tell them I have a clothing brand. I have Zulu Echo Initiative.
About the movement.
There's a clothing brand associated with it, but that's not the focus.
Yeah.
As of now.
Yeah.
I know and I believe that somewhere down the line there is a way to tie the two, whether that's through the kinds of projects that I, engage with, the kinds of designs that I engage with. One thing that is really special about architecture is that maybe not about architecture, but about having the ability to design architecture, is that every time you talk to somebody new, you can spatialize their person in a certain way. So if you talk to an artist, right, and they come to you and they tell you they have this crazy idea
of a house
for a house,
or an office, or,
you're not just designing a place for them to live.
Yeah.
You're designing a place for them to be passionate about art. You're designing
resonate with,
right, right. So for me, I mean, it's a question that I've been asking myself for a long time. It's a question that I don't think I'll have an answer to very soon. I think that's what excites me the most. It's kind of like I'm in this really like unique moment where
niche kind of thing.
Yeah, where on one side I have everything that I know for like I can graduate architecture school, get a job at an architecture firm, and that's that'll be that.
Yeah.
Then I have Zulu Echo. I could push it, forget architecture altogether, push that. But then there's this crazy cool thing that could happen if I brought the two together. And that for me, like I couldn't tell you right now how that's gonna happen. I just couldn't tell you. Yeah. But the vision is there. That desire to make that happen. Like I'm addicted to that desire.
Yeah.
I think one of the most influential books I've read is Start With Why by Simon Sinek.
I know Simon Sinek. I know that book. I haven't read it.
Such an incredible book. Yeah. It will change your life.
It's like, what's your purpose type of thing, right? It's
and
like
he draws this diagram.
Okay, there you go.
Where he goes why in the middle. It's like 3 concentric circles. Why in the middle, what, and then how. So you always start with the why. When why is firm, what you do can change. And how you do it will change.
Will change, yeah.
Right? But the why, right, the purpose, will always stay the same.
That makes so much sense.
And I mean, he explains it psychologically too. Like there's actual ties to how your brain works that make this, that makes this factual. But when you start to look at your life this way, and this is why Zulu Echo has changed the way it has from when I first started. Anybody that follows me or people that are close to me will know that it's changed. Like every 6 months I come up with like the craziest new idea that people are like, whoa, like okay, like I started doing films. Like that's something I started doing in the last year and a half.
Okay.
But when I started, I was blogging about architecture.
Okay.
But my purpose, the why,
stayed the same.
The purpose was I want to inspire people to follow their passion.
Yeah.
That's my purpose. That's my why. So what I did started to change, and how I did it started to change. But why never changed. So going back to your question, I think it's that. It's like my why is really clear, right? I want to inspire people to follow their passion because I believe that is the key to finding happiness in life. And I'm not the first person to say this. I will not be the last person to say this. But when you try it, like when you bite that bullet and you take it and you actually commit to it, you will start to see that that's the case, right?
Yeah.
Like the past 3 years I've been on this journey. They have been the best and the worst years of my life, but they balance each other out. Yeah.
And then make it worth it.
Yeah,
like
they really
the whole
do.
Journey worth
they
it.
really do, and it goes back to that uncomfort thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like I've been the most comfortable and the most uncomfortable I've ever been in these 3 years.
And you enjoyed both of them.
I love it. I really love it. Yeah. Like I think, like I'll be completely transparent with you. Most recently, I've been through a phase where, I wasn't doing too well, and there were doubts about whether what I was doing was worth it. There were doubts about what my relationship to my education was. I don't see myself dropping out because I committed to this and I want it, right? Like I came here because I wanted it, right?
You're passionate about
right.
it. Yeah.
So more recently, it's been one of those really uncomfortable phases of my life. I think what got me through it and what's getting me through it is an acknowledgement that burnout is real.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't remember who said it, but somebody said like burnout isn't real if you really love it.
No, that's bullshit.
And I agree in the sense that like you'll never burn out of the passion. Like you'll always have that desire to make that thing happen. But when it comes to your mind, when it comes to your health, when it comes to your fatigue levels, right? Burnout is super real.
Yeah.
And actually, like I had friends who have had to sit me down and tell me like, bro, chill.
Relax.
Like take a breath, take a week off. And like I committed in 2019, I committed to writing an article every week. And that's something that I did successfully, except for 2 weeks. 1 week was maybe a month ago, where I was like at the height of this kind of episode that I was telling you about. And the other one was for personal reasons that I needed to take a week off. And when I returned from the second one, this most recent one, when I wrote that first article, what I wrote about was one, why I decided not to write, but two, in the fact that like the ability to commit to something is not necessarily the output of it. It's the commitment to its purpose, right? So my commitment was to putting out content every week religiously. But I got to a place where the pressure to put out content was what was driving the content, not the reason that I wanted to put out the content.
It was overriding the purpose.
Right.
Kind of thing,
yeah. And that for me is like, that's when like the why and the what start to overlap, right? Like what started to become more important than why.
Yeah.
And that's really dangerous because that's where burnout happens.
Yeah.
And that's where like everything feels like it's crumbling down.
It falls apart.
You know what I mean? And that's where the doubt starts to come in.
Yeah.
So that's something that I really try to tell my viewers, not because I'm in a position where like I know better, but in a position where it's like, dude, I did this. Yeah. I did this a month ago. I was not okay. Anyone that's close to me knows I was not okay.
Yeah.
But here I am now, better for it.
Yeah.
You know, like I've put it in perspective. I've seen the bigger picture. I understand it's part of the process. But something had to change. Something had to give. I had to, you know, let go of something in order to save the bigger thing.
So that your why could breathe again.
Right.
Thing,
right. 100%.
Because it was getting suffocated
100%.
by it. And it's crazy that you say that. I resonate so much with just everything you just said about being getting to this point where you inevitably fall into this very dark environment. And I like to call it the dark energy type of thing. It's something that I've been theorizing, and I'm not the first one to bring this theory up, but essentially every elite performer, every athlete, every person that made a difference and that revolutionized and that innovated, they have this energy type of thing that kind of fuels their drive, right? And it's called dark energy, and that could give it like a negative connotation type of thing. It's like evil energy or anything like that. It's not. It's just like a dark energy in a sense where even if you have like a beneficial goal, right? Like you want to bring value to people. It's not an evil goal. It's not a negative thing, but it will be fueled by something that not everybody has. It's like it's something that your passion kind of just stabilizes itself on in order to keep itself from just deteriorating quickly. And I can't really explain it because there is no real explanation behind it. But essentially, I went through that very dark phase of my life as well. And mine lasted maybe like a month, I think, like a full month. And it was just during one of the biggest setbacks with the whole fiber fitness process. And it was just the very dark episode to a point where I started having like very, very bad thoughts, you know, like thoughts that you don't want to have. And you feel as if everything is just worthless. Like what you've been pursuing your whole life, you start questioning the goals behind it. You start doubting yourself to a point where, just like you said, like you question whether or not it's even worth continuing and pushing. And you start analyzing the effort that you put up until that moment and where you're currently at. And since you're not at the goal where you aspire to be, you start questioning whether or not it's even like whether you'll even reach that goal eventually. And then it's a very, very bad place to be in. But I think that every person that aspires to do something, they have to go into that place. And then it comes down to like, if you survive that space, it's kind of like that quote, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to go, but nobody wants to die. Like nobody's willing to die. So you have to be willing to kind of like kill yourself mentally and physically to kind of regenerate and reemerge as like a phoenix type of thing. And that's cliche as fuck, but
no, but it's true.
Yeah, it's true, man. Like you
it's a test, right? Like if you,
it's a test. Yeah.
I mean, it comes back. Like I mean, like you said, it's cliche to say like if you want it bad enough, you go through whatever it takes to get it. But I think it's like people really don't, and by people I mean myself included. Like we don't put in perspective when we say whatever it takes to get it. Like we don't know what that means. You know what I mean? People assume that means like I'm going to stay up all night for a year to get this thing done. And
then the problem is that you start comparing that, whatever it takes, to somebody else's whatever it takes. So you see a guy that sleeps 3 hours a night, 4 hours a night, and then you start saying like, all right, so if he's doing whatever it takes, I'm going to do that, whatever it takes for my goal. And then you just copy and paste it. But then you realize, all right, so for his environment, for his unique experience, for his unique goals, he's aspiring to do this and this and this. So that requires him. You're doing something completely different. Even if you're doing something that's similar, like it's a similar industry, still you're in New Jersey, that person's somewhere else. It's like you have to take all of these factors into account. And with social media, like it doesn't allow you to do that. Right. It does allow you to do that if you're smart, just like you said, like if you step back and look at it and realize that it's that evil, and then you try to tackle it and try to develop a solution for that evil rather than indulging in it and becoming delusional.
Right.
So that's actually my biggest beef with like Gymshark athletes. You know, Gymshark athletes, just fitness influencers, all of these, you know, people who, again, portray this perfect life, this perfect body, this perfect everything. Like everything is picture perfect. And then that person sells you a plan, sells you a roadmap type of thing. It's like it's a step-by-step guide of how to achieving that goal. And people buy it. Why? Because you get so overcome with the what and how that people who buy into that don't really have a why. So they're just fishing for what's and hows, right? So like social media is like you fishing for what's and hows. It's like, what does everybody else want? How do they get that? I'm gonna do the same. Like, oh, take steroids, take this, take that, lie about it, do this, do that. It's like, so people buy into that. But if you have a firm founded why, just like you said, and I love that diagram thing because of that 3-step in the middle type of thing. If you have a why, then you'll look at everybody else and then you'll think first, like, all right, before even thinking about the plan that Gymshark athlete is trying to sell you, you look at the Gymshark athlete instead. And then you're like, all right, so why is he doing this? Like, what is he trying to accomplish with this? Is it strictly monetary gain? Is that person truly passionate? Like, there are a few influencers who I follow, not only fitness related, but the Nusret, for example, like he's hugely inspiring to me because he's real, he's raw, like he shows you the nitty and gritty of it. So he's not just out there posting pictures with, you know, cars and Lamborghinis. He doesn't even do that. Like he just like posts videos of him just working out and sweating a shit ton and just contorting his fucking clothes after and dripping and just like that. To me, again, it ties back to the whole like, what can I learn from that person? So I'm actually gonna apply that to my Instagram following because I did it recently where I unfollowed like a bunch of people who were just kind of fillers, you know, and I hate to use that term because it reduces everybody to like this thing and people can take it the wrong way. But to me, they were kind of like fillers. It was kind of like, there were at least 50 people who I just was scrolling and then I was like, why do I follow you? Like some people I didn't even know who they were anymore. Like some people I was like, so you unfollow those people, and then some of them actually take it the wrong way, obviously, because, you know, there's ego involved, and it's like, oh, who's this asshole? And people keep track of that. They have the apps that notify them, oh, so-and-so unfollowed, because they care about that. They care about being followed. But if they care about it so much, like that should be indicative of just who they are as a person and their character, right? Because it shouldn't be about that at the end of the day. And yeah, man, it's just, I guess, just fucking, just like do it, like do something substantial. Like you can't prolong something that's not real. And I just like try to do this podcast, for example, like this podcast, the whole idea behind it is actually that, because you can, for example, in a 15-minute conversation in, you know, back and forth on DMs, even if it's voice, audio messages, whatever, you can't really have that connection with someone, right? And my followers, your followers, let's say that this podcast didn't exist or it didn't happen, they were judging us based off of our pictures, our, you know, videos or whatever. You can't really make a discernment on just who someone is. So you have to establish that human connection. So like that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast. It's like humanize everybody. It's like, I don't care how many followers you have. I don't invite people on here because of like stupid socially constructed metrics like followings, engagements. Like I give a fuck about that. I've had people on here who have like maybe 200 followers or some shit like that. Like I could give a fuck. It's like it's more so about that first interaction, the mindset, the like where that person is at mentally, and then also looking at it from like a growth perspective too. It's like that person has 200, just like I told you, like you have 3,000. I think like why don't you have 3 million? Because the content that you put out should be valued and measured, its value at least measured off of your passion, off of your why, off of like why is it that you think that person should, have these followers, not because of clickbaity, booty workouts and abs and.
I think another thing too is kind of like I'd rather have 3,000 people that are listening to me because it helps them. Than 3 million people that are following me because my pictures look good.
Just because of that.
Like I think another thing that and I always have to like kind of negotiate with myself what my relationship to what I'm about to say is, but the feedback that I get from people about what I do is so humbling.
Yeah.
I have people who will reach out and say like I don't like people that I don't even know that will tell me like, oh, this video that you made, I showed it to my son and my son is doing so much better now because of it. That's not even something I imagined would happen with the video. But the purpose behind the video actually allowed that to happen. The purpose was inspire people.
Not just clicks or comments.
You know what I mean? So even though I don't know that person to me is like literally manifestation of that purpose and its effect. So, and like I said, I negotiate with myself my relationship to that because I don't want my sense of fulfillment to come off what other people's feedback is, right? So
that's ego.
Right. So that's something that I'm always kind of trying to reflect on. But it does also show you it's kind of like people are a metric.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like your influence on people, the way you make them feel, the way they respond to what you say, what you put out, that is a metric, you know? And one of the things that it's on one of the other hoodies that I've made is just be kind. You like genuinely just stop for a minute and just be kind to everyone.
Yeah. We need a lot of that nowadays.
Yeah. And I think like we also like I think when I did put it out first, like somebody was like, dude, like, what are you doing?
Cliche.
Like, so cliche. I was like, yeah, but when was the last time you were genuinely kind to someone?
Yeah. Without expecting
anything in return, without, doing it to show other people that you're kind. Like, when were you genuinely kind?
Yeah. And
I remember this actually happened recently. Like, I was wearing the hoodie. And I was in a situation where I was in an argument with someone and I really got heated. And I don't know what happened, but I looked down and I was like, oh shit.
You're wearing the
be
hoodie.
Kind. You know what I mean? I was like, all right, I'm just going to step back. Not because confrontation, I'm against confrontation. Like I think there's healthy ways to be confrontational, But when it gets to a point where your confrontation is actually coming from a place of like
hatred,
shut up.
Yeah.
There's nothing to learn there anymore.
Yeah.
And I personally don't like being in situations or being in contexts where I have nothing to learn from.
Yeah.
And that for me is like the kindness factor of what people do and what they put out on their social media. Like you cannot sell kindness. Do you know what I mean? Like you cannot. Like there's no metric on Instagram when your insights where it's like, all right, you've been 73% kind this week. Like that's not a thing, right? But inside you know it. Like you know when you've been kind because you also have to be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
And that process of like understanding that before you use any sort of social media or technology or whatever it might be, you're a human being before that.
Human being first.
You're a human being before anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before being a CEO, before being an entrepreneur, you are a human being just like everybody else around you.
Yeah.
And well, you said something. I'm trying to remember what it was now. It'll come back. It'll come back.
Yeah.
But it had to do with this idea that like the metrics that we use to judge our own kind of growth, right? Like there's quantitative metrics and then the qualitative metrics for me are equally as important.
Yeah.
And the qualitative comes from this is what you said. You said something about like telling stories about like
controlling the narrative.
Yes, controlling the narrative, right? Yeah. So when you are kind like that, right? Your narrative is actually as transparent as it can be.
Yeah.
Because that's human nature right there.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So there's nothing that nobody can say anything against what you say because you're being genuine, you know? So that's when you're in control of the narrative. So when you are your best version of yourself, no one can override your narrative.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I think another part of this is, and we were talking earlier about how kind of the value of telling your story. Like some people think that certain stories have a higher value than others. I think that's bullshit.
100% bullshit.
Like, I think
1000%.
the fact that we think like, okay, I'm gonna read this book because this guy made it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
One says that you're not looking to grow yourself, you're just looking to fame.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. But then the fact that like people that are not under the spotlight also have these stories that are maybe even closer to yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, like ridiculously close to yours. Like maybe they even know the same people you know. Mm-hmm. All you need to do is sit down and have a genuine conversation.
Just look around you.
Literally.
Yeah.
It's really about that.
Yeah.
Tying back to architecture because, you know.
Because
one of the things that makes successful architecture is when it engages with its context. Right? So when it ties
historical context,
location, social context, everything around it, when it engages in it, whether it develops it, helps it grow, it you know, it maintains
absorbs it.
Yeah, you know.
Thing,
So, and this is something that we study extensively, right? But understanding your context doesn't just mean like knowing what's around you. It's also about putting yourself in that context, situating yourself in that context.
Because you can't absorb something objectively,
right?
That has a subjective meaning to it. Right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I'm really big on this whole like storytelling thing, and this is actually why I started making videos. I started making films, is because it's just such a like direct way of telling stories, and I think like if you look historically as to like why people would tell each other stories, it's about learning. It's really about like this is your history, this is your this is your history, this is your culture, these are your traditions, this is your family history, is whatever, right? But knowing that actually by sharing your story, you're not only being okay with letting out who you are, but you're also giving somebody a potential cosign that they've been waiting for. Like you're giving them that cosign that whatever they're going through, they're not the only one. They're not alone. Yeah. Why? Because we're all human beings. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so for me, I wrote this article once called This is my book, Can I Read Yours? And the idea behind it is like, listen, I'm being as transparent as I can be, right? So I'm telling you my story. Let me hear yours. Let's see where they overlap. Let's see where they differ. Let's see like what things we're both struggling with. You know, maybe something you succeeded at will actually help me succeed at something that I'm struggling with right now, right? Or maybe we're both screwed and we have no idea what to do, but for some reason the fact that we can do it together actually helps us get through it.
Yeah, and then both of you grow because of
that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really about this kind of like, and this goes back to the whole like influencer thing, you know, where it's like there are people who are influencing a great deal and they're doing really great things and the influence that they're having is fantastic. But when you put yourself in a position where it's like, how many followers do you have? I have 3 million. So therefore my story is more valuable, right? You're actually missing out on opportunities. And that for me is like really frustrating. And that's where like, I personally believe social media has this potential to actually like flip the table, right? Like, when you can identify people that are genuine, right, off of social media, right, you can either look at their social media and realize that they're lying, or you look at their social media and like, holy shit, I'm learning from this person. I'm actually growing because of the content that I'm engaged. Like when I like it, my liking their picture is a manifestation of me saying I learned something from this post.
And this person's level of transparency helps me develop my own level of transparency and vice versa.
Right.
And also, I think that a big thing that you've touched on is the like where cultures kind of intersect, right? So I think that the biggest learning point on anything and everything in life is where two things intersect.
Absolutely.
So again, it ties into the diagram thing kind of thing. Because we have cognitive dissonance, right? So we have this ability to uphold contradicting beliefs. So it's kind of like that time when you caught yourself being unkind and then you look down and you're like, oh shit, like this is what I represent. This is my brand. This is what I stand for. And so it's very easy for you to just leave that unchecked and unpoliced, right? So you have to constantly be policing yourself and constantly be like in control of just how your purpose manifests in the world, because otherwise other aspects and, you know, ego tends to overcloud it sometimes. And then you just have to leave that, you know, checked. So basically it's like, if you want to learn from anything and just like any culture, religion, political system, social system, whatever, you always look at where ideas kind of intersect and where like they kind of counterdict each other, right? So also that comes into like the whole like narrative framework. It's like, what narrative is that person conveying? And then look behind that narrative, and that narrative serves as like kind of like a facade sometimes. So then you look at the essence of that building, at the essence of the foundation, and see if that foundation is actually in tune with what the facade. So like instead of you creating a house that has like this castle facade and then inside it's like a prison, it's like, wait, but that contradicts. It's like, you know, like the function of the building isn't coherent to what the building actually is as a, you know. And historically speaking, there's actually going back to the whole like oral form of communication and just disseminating information and teaching. The first form of writing was actually by an accountant, because the first form of just written down information was I think it's called I forgot the name. But basically it's just like mathematical quantitative information and data, because our brains have developed over time ever since we were hunters and gatherers, and ever since the agricultural revolution, the cognitive revolution, all this stuff, we've been conditioned through thousands of years. And this is another thing, like people think that, I know I'm all over the place, but it'll all make sense. So people think that it's very easy for you to like change, right? Like, oh, like I'm New Year's resolutions. It's like, I'm going to be a better person. I'm going to be this. People create these unrealistic standards for themselves, these goals that aren't attainable, right? If you're realistic about it, you're like straightforward and blunt with yourself, you'll know that it's just not going to happen. So you have to make those incremental steps. But basically what I'm trying to say is we've been developed through thousands and thousands of years to be who we are today. And so in this short time span, it just so happens that with the Industrial Revolution, technological revolution, we're at this place now where we have social media, we have cameras, we have all of this technology, all of this good stuff. And it's very easy for us to approach that as like, this is how we've always been. So that's the value of like studying history, I think. It's just understanding these innate biological, these innate primal instincts and just conditioning and just behavior patterns that you can't really, no matter how hard you try to overlook them, they'll always be there. So that's why I'm huge into psychology. I'm huge into like human behavior, because it helps me discern like, okay, this just happens to be the time period, the zeitgeist that we currently find ourselves in. But I know for a fact that what we truly are has been the same, and just, you know, small little differences and small little changes. So the narrative thing is like, that's everything around us. So the same way that you see things through architecture, I see things through that primal human behavior narrative type of framework. So I always adopt everything from like a psychological perspective and a historical perspective, because you have to look back and see like, oh shit, like just 500 years ago we were this and this, and just 1,000 years ago we were this and this. So it's just this like little blimp in history that we're like this right now. And so the people who understand and actually put in the effort to gain knowledge through books, reading, podcasting, are the ones that are able to understand like, oh shit, these people have no idea like who we really are, like who they really are. Like they're just being fed all of this propaganda, like you should be like this through social media, and you should accept this, you should buy my package, you should buy my program, you should. And yeah, man, it's just.
Well, I think what you said about history, right? About like looking back and understanding that like who we are is a development of what we've been historically. There's like another whole side to that, which is like you are a point in the development of what we will be.
Yeah.
And I think
this is not a finished product.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all a finished product. And that's where like when people say like, oh, but this is who we are and like the world is fucked, like that's where I'm kind of like right now it is. Yeah. You know?
And that's the right way of looking at it.
Right. But and it takes like it really takes a special kind of crazy to think that way. Yeah. Because it takes what, you know, it takes scalar thinking. It takes being able to say like, okay, this is this at this scale. This is what I'm talking about at this scale. But in reality, like me operating here and all the other billions of people that are operating at that scale, like we're actually operating at this scale. Yeah. Right. It goes back to like this metaphor that I love is like you're a pixel on a screen. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like one pixel goes out, nobody notices. Right. But if we stop shining half the screen, like if we just like forget that screen exists,
It starts fucking
the image is different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's about like understanding that you are a pixel on that screen.
Yep.
Right. And the information that gets fed to each pixel is always different, right? Like we each have our own personality, we each have our own role, but all together,
That's a dope metaphor.
there is a screen there.
Yeah.
And when you see that, you start to understand like you're actually ridiculously empowered. Like you have so much potential, right? Like maybe you go and talk to somebody and you start to influence their opinion. And this can go both ways. Like there are people that do this for the bad, right? And that's where you have to like, you know, moderate it. But the ability that we have as people to do that, you know, to just like to understand our power over the kind of course that we take, right? And to like really take responsibility for not necessarily take responsibility for what we have been through, right? Like I think not that what we have been through. I mean like what history has been through, right? Like I think a lot of people will say like, oh, but that's not me. Like that's my heritage. Like that's who I was as a like historically, but that's not me. That's totally fine. Like I believe that, you know. But it's kind of like, all right, well, if that's not you, who will you be? Like who are you and who will you be? And that's like, and history also like happens at the scale of the individual, right? Like it's not that like there were 50 people that all had the same personality somehow and they made history. No, it's like 50 people that all had different personalities, but something united them. They made history. Yeah. So you can make your own history too. You know, like if I at the end of my life get handed a book and it's like, yo, this is what you did with your life. I want to read that book and be like, like it was holy crap. You know, like where's part 2? You know what I mean? But like. That's the kind of way that I think about these things. It's like history is like if you just break it down, it's like his story. It's like it's literally the story of who you are. Yeah. And you're writing it every day. And when you realize that, you actually realize that like you're no different in terms of your capacity than the people that came before you.
Or the people that are already on these pedestals in society. Yeah. And then using that book metaphor, I also like to say that if you find yourself in this monotone reality where you're just conducting yourself in this suppressed form and manner where you're conforming to the standards that society upholds for you and you're letting society determine everything for you and just fix you into this little box and you have a 9 to 5 and you're working for your entire life and you go every single morning, you're miserable, you work towards a 501k, 401k to retire and everything. So if you abide by the standards and the status quo, that to me is like you literally writing your book, but every chapter is the same. It's like chapter 1's the same as chapter 2, and then chapter 3, and then chapter 4. And then just like you said, like if you get a book like that, you're just going to read chapter 1 and then you're going to be like, what the fuck is this? You know? And then
why read the rest of it?
And maybe you won't even finish chapter 1 because then chapter 1's just this unexciting tale of you waking up, brushing your teeth, and just walking in, putting on a tie, and just going about your day. So I think that that's where people get very confused. And just like you said, you have to have that perspective, right? I think that perspective is the most valuable thing that you can have. So if you have a limited perspective, you have limited range of motion type of thing. So you have a limited, I guess, mobility. And also vision-wise, like you can't really see too far ahead. Like you can only see as much as you've learned and acquired and assimilated type of thing. So I think that thresholds are also something that are always expanding. And it goes into like the whole like getting fatigued, getting tired, getting burnt out. I think that over time, you'll reach another burnout moment. But that threshold of like how much you can take before you reach it again will increase and will be stronger and fortified because you went through that first one. So then through that first burnout moment, you realize and learned a lot from it. And then you'll implement those lessons that you've acquired and that knowledge that you've developed into the next burnout moment to kind of minimize that impact. So it's kind of like developing a car from like the first Ford vehicle with no airbags to the best Volvo nowadays with like the most secure car on the planet. You could, so it's like that development process, thing. And then I think that through that, you develop your character. So like you have to, how do I say that? You have to go through those experiences. Like it's not an option. You have to suffer. Because like life to me is incessant suffering. And although that sounds very pessimistic, it's really not. It's just really factual. It's like you're dying right now if you think about it. Like you're like, it's not pessimistic, and then you're dying right now.
Yeah.
You're like, it's not pessimistic at all. But like looking at it from like a biological standpoint, like you're decaying. Slowly but surely you're decaying. Like obviously you're not really dying, but you're getting older, you're not getting younger. And so it's this incessant suffering. So it's like at the point of maximum suffering is the point of maximum transformation, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So you can't really, for example, a lot of religions, if not every religion, kind of relies on this idea of suffering. So if you look at Christianity with like Christ and everything, so Christ is put on this cross, and then at the point X marks the spot, at the point of that cross is where he suffers the most. And then comes the transformation and the, you know, and I'm not even a religious person, but I love just studying these manifestations of culture, these manifestations of these constructs, right? Because culture is the one thing that unifies everybody. So just like you touched on before, it's like, it's not 50 people that have different opinions and that like everybody, like if that were the case, if individualism was the sole purpose for our development, then we would be fucked because it's 50 people. One wants to master the seas and fishing, the other wants to be the fastest tree climber, whatever. We would be completely fucked. So we rely on like cultures, and that's where movements come into play. So it's like, it's a human construct. It's not palpable. It's not real. Like you can't get your movement and actually like present it to me. It's like, hey, like,
this is my baby.
This is my movement right here. Like you can't do that. Like it's not palpable. It's not real. This is palpable. This is real, right? But even like marketing, everything else is just a human construct. And so that's also how I view reality. It's like it's the juxtaposition of conjured reality and palpable physical biological reality. So where they intersect is where we lie.
Yeah.
So then you have to just be careful to not let the conjured reality take over the real reality. And that's what happens today. Like if you think about it, all these organizations, governments, everything that's a human construct has more saying on what our objective reality is going to be. So they control the narrative for saving the planet.
Right.
The planet's real.
Right.
Governments aren't real if you think about it.
Right.
The social contract isn't real. Like none of this is real. But we do believe it's real. And if you get enough people to believe in it, then that's enough to keep our species developing and stuff.
Yeah.
And then thinking that we're a finished product is just, it's honestly not only ignorant, but I think it's like, it's just stupid. Like you're a stupid person if you think that this is it.
Yeah.
You know,
I think you said something really interesting about like the point of maximum suffering is the point of maximum transformation.
Yeah.
I think this also ties to something really interesting that I try to practice a lot, and that's like the concept of balance. And I think, you know, Jay Shetty,
I think I do. Yeah. He's like in not Indian, but he's Middle Eastern, right?
I think he is Indian. Yeah, I think he is Indian. He went into like, he became a monk for a little bit, and now he gives these really great talks. Yeah. But I watched this video that he put out where he was describing like life. And he said like, if you look at a heartbeat on a monitor, it looks like this. Right? Yeah. It's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. It's not constant. The second it's constant, you're dead.
Oh shit.
So if your life is like this, right? Like you're not optimizing anything, you're not maximizing anything, you're not learning anything, you're not growing, you're not getting hurt. So this is something that a lot of people actually have talked to me about because people that are very close to me, even like they come up to me like, oh, how are you so positive all the time? Like how is it just like you're consistently positive? There's nothing negative that comes. It's like, that's not true. Like that isn't true.
There's the ups
and I'm actually less effective at my work or with my work if I believe that I'm constantly positive. And I think like the key to that comes where you have to just identify the fact that the power of being a positive person comes not when things are going well, but when things are not going well. It's the belief that when something is not going well, there's a positive outcome that is possible.
Yes.
That's being a positive person, right? So it's like, okay, like this is my life. Right now I'm here.
So prepare for...
I could either go back up
or stay.
Or I could stay there.
And if you're up, then prepare for the worst.
For the worst. Not necessarily prepare for the worst. I don't know about preparing for the worst, but it's more so of like you have limited time.
Bracing for impact, maybe?
Yeah, maybe brace for impact.
Yeah.
Brace for impact, but you have limited time.
Yeah.
It's not going to last forever. what are you going to do to maximize your efficiency at this moment?
And
right?
to maybe not go as low next time.
Yeah. Like it could be like this. You know, like a good stock, you know, like something like it keeps growing, right? But like that's actually maybe a better way to put it, right? Not the heartbeat, but the stock. Right? And I think like that is a really important concept, right? Mm-hmm. Like being able to be okay with knowing that there's good and bad, right? That is being a positive. For me, that's being a positive person, right? So when people ask me like, how do you remain positive all the time? My answer is because I know that when shit sucks, it's not forever. Yeah. And I know that the sun's coming up again. I'm going to have another shot to make things better. And that's what I'm looking forward to. Yeah. And that's what gets me through it. Yeah. Now, how you go about that, right? Like suppressing that ability to say like, okay, things are not going well right now. Like being able to like just, if you were to just push that to the side and say, no, I'm fine. That's where then things start to get really bad.
That's when you start to deteriorate.
Yeah. And it's just, your mind isn't there. You're not effective in the things you want to be doing. Your purpose starts to get all fuzzy. Your relationships deteriorate. It's not actually, it's more detrimental to yourself when you ignore this negative part of your life. It's like more so like when you're there, what can you learn? Yeah. Right? Like, why am I here? What am I going to do about being here? What's got to change for me to get out of here? Like, it's more so that it's this continuous state of like moving, knowing that this is part of the process. You either can process it or you can be done. Or you can let it process you. Exactly. Yeah.
And do you know about the whole like yin and yang concept? Yeah. So that to me is exactly what you just said. It's wherever chaos is dominant, there's always an opportunity for order. And wherever order prevails, chaos beckons. So it's kind of like that image of the Tao is, you know, chaos kind of like is impeding in order and vice versa. So it's the white and black fish, koi fish. And that even the concept and the duality of good and bad, I've grown to realize that at least the way I view life, that it's nothing more than another human construct if you really think about it. Like the dualism behind it of viewing something as bad or viewing something as good, really, I don't really think that there is good or bad, because there is only what is and what you can garner from each thing. So it's kind of like, even at my worst moments, like I learned more than during my best moments. So is that objectively bad? Is that subjectively bad? What is bad? You know, like I learned from it, I grew, and even if it's bad, I also grow. Yeah, because I didn't die. Yeah. So then it goes back to the whole like, whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Again, another cliche, but it's true. Like it's a universal truth. If it didn't kill you, then is it bad or good? And the only reason why, even if it kills you, it's bad, for example, is because we don't understand death and we don't know what comes after, for example, right? So if we did understand death, and let's say that there is the concept of heaven and hell or whatever it is, and you go to a better place, then death itself would not be viewed as a bad thing anymore. So it's all like a construct. It's all about like how we interpret something, you know, and that duality though. And then people, I guess they avoid anything that's bad. So that's the reason why they'll never grow, because there's no growth without discomfort. There's no growth without pain, and there's no succumbing to that, you know, point of like maximum suffering where you're about to fucking just throw the towel in and you just can't take it anymore, and you want to give up or kill yourself or do whatever, you know, drastic measures to get out of that point, but then you overcome it. And then you now have a newfound knowledge that you can't really buy a book and learn from it that way. Like you can communicate your pain and your scars to someone and try to like find lessons from them and convey that lesson and try to teach people, but you can't really instill in them that knowledge like the same way that because you went through it. Yeah, they're gonna read it off a page. Yeah, textbook, Harvard, whatever. Like you could go to the best university in the country and learn from like the best people, but you won't really learn. Like you have to me, everything's through experience. So that's why like I love this podcast. Like I'm learning from your experiences, because through this human connection, through this conversation, it's almost like you're taking me with you to that experience. But at the same time, I will never feel what you felt at that moment, because I can't replicate that pain, right? So that even applies to like the historical analysis of just last societies. Like we can learn about Nazis, about like what they did to the Jewish people, for example, and how atrocious their acts were, but we'll never feel their pain because there's that like wall of silence type of thing. Like we can't put ourselves in that environment. Like we can empathize and sympathize. Like that's something that we, thank God, like we have. But yeah, it's just.
I mean, I think that's where like storytelling comes in.
Storytelling, yeah.
Like, that's where it's like, let's sit down.
Yeah,
with
filming,
people.
movies, especially movies. Yeah,
like let's sit down with people that are not like us, and let's just let each other talk. Let's just listen to each other. Let's just hear what other experiences. That's why I respect this podcast so much, because it is about storytelling. Yeah. It's about, this is a bit of what I've been through. Let me give it to you. Maybe it'll help you. And maybe not. And if not, that's fine. But maybe it'll help someone else, you know?
And if it impacts one person, like that to me is enough.
Of course.
That's why I told you, it's like, I don't care. I don't want to spend money on like marketing this podcast. And that's just like a personal choice that I've made. Even though I have the conditions to do it, like I can market, I can hire like a marketing team or whatever, and really push it and start, you know, getting some advertisements and stuff. But I want it to grow organically. Absolutely. I want it like word of mouth. I want, you know, whoever listens to our episode, either your followers, my followers, they like what you said, I said, they'll follow you, they'll start supporting your journey, your movement. And I think that it's very powerful when you resonate with someone on like a deeper level, like through their purpose, right? Absolutely. Because then you're able to access the part of you that is able to give without expecting anything in return. So if it's like the more superficial, the value that you put out is, the more superficial the support is going to be. Absolutely. So if it's deep seated, like if it's actually something that you really, like people actually resonate with and they feel like they were there with you, it's like, fuck, like this guy, like he went through the same thing, then they'll be there, like every post they'll be liking. And then that person is the only one that really matters at the end of the day. Like him and the other 10, 50, or 1,000 people that actually are on that level, rather than, oh, I'm gonna like it because he likes my pictures. Yes. Oh, he didn't like my last 3 pictures, so fuck him. It's like, oh, what? Like, I have followers like that right now, and some of them are even like that hatred and that stupid, just underdeveloped way of thinking is like predicated on the fact that I didn't invite them to be on this podcast type of thing. You know, like I have people who are like, for example, I'll post stuff, post highlights, and they won't like it. And I know for a fact, like I have that feeling that they don't like my stuff because it's not them type of thing. So it's that win-lose type of thing. It's like, if you're on here, then that automatically means that the person watching lost the opportunity to be on here. Instead of viewing this as like a podcast that can go like thousands of episodes and we can do an episode together and grow together and like build it up and stuff. And
it's about the mindset, really.
It's all about the mindset. It's all about what you want, the impact that you have on others. Like that to me is the most valuable currency. Like you can have money, you can have everything, but like, what will people say at your funeral? What will people, how many people will be there? Will there be anybody there? Will people care? Will, you know, and that ties into ego, but at the same time, it's like it takes being selfish to be selfless type of thing, right?
I think it comes down to like, what is the impact of your kindness?
Yeah.
What's the impact of your humanity?
Yeah.
That's not something to be egotistical about. I think that's something that's genuine, right? Like you can look at somebody and understand that you brought them joy. That's something to be proud of. That's something to be happy about, right? There's nothing material about that. Actually, it's the most immaterial thing it could be. Yeah. You know? I think, you know Prince EA? Yeah. He makes these phenomenal videos. Really videos. Incredible guy. He gave this one speech where he was talking about influencers. And he was saying, like, all you people that call yourself influencers, like, what's your influence? Yeah. And, like, that hit me. I was like, whoa. Yeah. You know, like, there's people you get to their page, you're like, this dude is sick. Yeah. Like, he's balling. He's got Ferraris, Lamborghinis. And then you, like, actually interact with this person. You're like, whoa, this is a really crappy person. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's really about that. It's like, what is the influence? And that's a personal decision. Like, there's no rule book for this. Like, this comes down to, like, who you genuinely want to be in the world. Yeah. And that is, I think, the most, like, that's what all of this comes down to for me, right? Like, it really comes down to, you have a limited amount of time here. In that time, who do you want to be? That doesn't mean how rich do you want to get, how many companies do you want to own. That means, like, your day-to-day, who do you want to be? Yeah. How many smiles do you want to put on people's faces? Yeah. How many lives do you want to change? How many times do you want to pick yourself up when you fall? Like, it comes down to that. It comes down to really, like, what is the influence that you're having? I think, like, that gets really caught up with, like, legacy. I think, like, legacy is something that people fixate on. Everybody wants to leave a legacy, you know, and everybody wants to leave a good legacy, and everybody wants to leave a legacy that can be remembered. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, it can give you something to work towards, but it goes back to why. Like, why do you want to leave a legacy, right? Like, if your legacy is that you're the shittiest CEO the company's ever seen, like,
and you made a shit ton of money,
right?
So
You know, like, that's not a legacy I'm happy to go away with. You know what I mean? But it's more so. It's like, if I could look back on my life and, like, talk to the people that I've interacted with, and been like, did I make you happy? Like, have my actions helped you grow?
In some shape or form.
And if they can say yes, that's a legacy I'm trying to leave. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and if you really think about it, like, because I tend to kind of find myself thinking about these more philosophical questions about just life, existence. And I'll find myself just contemplating, like, the whole aspect of existence, right? If you think about, like, purpose, if you really think about it, we don't have purpose. Like, there is no real purpose behind anything. Like, we don't have a manual, a guidebook. Like, we weren't, like, put here by any other higher force that we know of that can, you know, guide us objectively. Like, we can talk to them, communicate. Like, there is no God that speaks back to you type of thing. So, like, we construct purposes and we try to find purpose and develop it. But even that whole idea of just, like, living life with purpose, but then I don't know what I'm trying to say with this.
Like, where does the purpose come from, basically? Yeah.
It's just like, just like how weird is it that we're here in the first place and that we don't have purpose, but we're able to develop that purpose. And that purpose is able to be so powerful that it kind of impacts and persuades other people to develop their own. And then it's just this butterfly effect and this domino effect of, like, if one person is courageous enough to pursue their goals. And then if you think about it, like, there had to be one point in history where our little tribe of 20 people living, you know, next to a riverbed or whatever, one person had to deviate from that mindset. But what led that person to do that? It's like, what clicked in their head? It's like that's something that has always fascinated me. It's like, and that's something that we'll never know because of that wall of silence. Like, we can't really understand, and those people didn't even, like, write anything. It's like one person, that's all it takes. So, like, that's why I like to say, it's like, if one person takes value in it, then that's a sign, and it should be a sign that you're doing something substantial, something worthwhile. But nowadays, it's like people will just look at it like, oh, it's just one person. Like, why not 1,000? You know, like, I have to show more cleavage. I have to do this, I have to do that to get more people to follow, and that's enough for them. But then if you look at it objective, like, I was watching P. Diddy's birthday party video, dope ass video too. His birthday party, like, was just full of all of these like A-list celebrities, you know, Jay-Z, Kevin Hart, like all these like top tier celebrities and personalities of society. And I was just scrolling through the comments, and one person said, like, oh, like, I bet that if you were to go broke tomorrow, none of those people would be there. And then I started questioning myself. I was like, I should develop a purpose and have a purpose that is that can sustain that obstacle. You know, it's like your purpose shouldn't be founded on one pillar type of thing. It's like, if your purpose revolves around making money, then the moment you don't have that money anymore, then everything else around you crumbles, and you don't have any friends anymore, and you don't have any acquaintances, any following, any nothing. If your purpose is predicated on your good looks, you can get into a car crash, into an accident, and then you can just reconfigure your whole look, and now you don't have any following, any friends. So it's like the only thing that can sustain that is like positive impact, and then kindness again. Like it's really kindness. And then people can go the other way and thrive off of hatred. So then you have hate groups, and that are against, you know, aimed at another group of people. But I think that kindness is always like a more powerful thing. And that was actually in the book that I read about viral content, where he spoke about the need to like, it's better to disseminate and propagate kindness and happiness as opposed to hate. But the psychology of it is that people develop stronger ties when they're unified by a common hatred. So that's something that I've found that like you could look at Twitter, Instagram, and you'll see that. It's like when everybody hates someone, they can bond better together. So again, a team, a war, anything that's like just predicated on like a common enemy, we bond better. So that goes back to like barbarians at the gate. So it's hard for us to make that shift, but I think that that's what a lot of people are trying to do. And I think that it is possible to make that shift, but it takes time.
It does.
So like, again, thousands of years of priming led to us being this way. Like we were very violent animals. Like we used to, you know, kill people on a daily basis, walk around with swords and just, you know, like the value of life was very, very, very small. Yeah. Like over a confrontation, or if you spilled my drink, like we could battle to death because of that. Like there's no conversation. There's no, you know, so yeah, man, it's just, I don't know. And then, like purpose, man, just fucking purpose.
I mean, that comes back to like the diagram, the why, what, how.
Yeah.
Right? Like you said, if the money was gone, none of these people would be here. It's because they were there for what you have, not why you were there.
Exactly that.
Right? And like, it really, like when you read his book, he really, like Simon Sinek does this phenomenal job of just actually tying it to human psychology.
I should buy that book.
Yeah, you really should. It's phenomenal. I recommend it to anybody that, I mean, the book, it speaks about it through kind of like leadership in business. Like that's kind of the goal, or not the goal, but the major kind of theme of the book, right?
But he backs it up with
He backs it up with stuff that's like personal, but then you can also like you know, ask questions about it to yourself.
About yourself.
You know, like if you can run a successful, like a properly successful, by successful I don't mean bringing in money, I mean properly inspiring foundation or corporation. Yeah. That means you should have that ability to do that same thing for yourself. Like you should be able to build that empire inside you.
Internalize that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he does this really phenomenal job. Like that book really changed how I think about a lot of things. And it also, in a really weird way, it validated a lot of the things that I was like, I think this, but I don't know if it's true.
You were on the fence. Kind of thing,
you know. And then when I read it and he explained it factually, that's when I was like, okay, like there's something here. Yeah. I think a big question that, like, or a big part of all of this stuff that we've been talking about comes down to like, how much do you want to learn? You know, like we live in a world where there's a preconceived notion that you go to school, you get your education, and then the paper validates everything you've learned. Yeah. In some situations, that's true, but I think like we live now in a time where if you want to be anything but that, you have to learn, and you have to learn on your own. And that's part of what makes it so great. You know, like I had no idea how to start a website, write a blog, like none of that, you know, like nothing. And I didn't get taught that in school either. Like architecture school doesn't teach me that stuff, you know, but I did it in one night because I wanted to make it happen. So the question, and this is where it really comes down to like understanding you are in control of your life. You know, like I heard this song the other day that had this phenomenal lyric. What was it? He said, YouTube University. I've seen them never go to college, but they're still gaining knowledge, something like that. And I was like, whoa, like, you know, I have people that have come up to me and like said like, oh, you edit videos like this. Like, how did you do that? And I was like, YouTube.
This podcast.
Literally YouTube. Like I have went on YouTube. I have typed in how to do something super specific, you know, and then I've done it. And then I've been hired to do that skill. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's has nothing to do with what I do in school at all. Yeah. You know?
There's no excuse.
Not at all. Yeah. So it really comes down to like, again, who do you want to be? You want to be someone that, and who you want to, like the answer to that question is not something that I can judge. If you tell me you want to be status quo, that's your decision. That's not my place to judge. That's up to you. Yeah. But if you don't want to be status quo,
then you have
the opportunity to do things that you might think differently, you know? And I think like it's sad, but it's also maybe the nature of it is just the fact that like if you don't want to be status quo, we don't live in a society that's built for that.
That enables you.
Yeah, you know, and that's I guess that's what it means to be status quo. But like
Yeah.
getting out of that is such an important journey, right? So if you believe that there is something that you want to do outside of that, go and do it.
Yeah.
That's why I do this.
Yeah.
That's why I put out all the content that I do. That's why I can't come on to things like this and talk with people like you and look for people like you to talk about these things so that other people can hear the fact that it's not only what you sit in a lecture 3 times a week and listen
Domino
to.
effect, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I've gained more credits in this lecture, this talk right now than in some lectures I've sat through in college. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like that's fine. Like it's also like times change, technology changes, the way our brains work change, the kind of things we engage with are different. Like that's part of that history that gets rewritten, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like what kind of a voice do you want to have in that process?
Yeah.
And put your voice in there.
Put it in there. And it's funny that you say that because I think it was yesterday. I logged onto Facebook and I saw this post where someone shared this thing about in 2020, I'm not gonna get caught up or get stressed about establishing goals. I'm just gonna let God take the wheel type of thing. I'm just gonna let God be in command. And again, I'm very careful with how I tread on the whole like religion aspect and political side of things because I don't want to like be polarizing. I don't want to like polarize the audience. I don't want people to, I'm trying to like always look at both sides of things, and it's important to have faith. It's important to have that. But again, that sense of self-accountability, I think that when you do something like that and you just put yourself in that mindset of like, no, I'm not going to put in any effort. I'm just going to go with the flow, let the universe do its thing, let God do its thing, let whatever you believe in do its thing. That's kind of just you getting the accountability, the responsibility for self-awareness, for self-accountability, and just placing it onto someone else. So you're not courageous enough. Again, that's you accepting the status quo. And we need people like that. Like it's great. It's a balance, right? So we need a balance. We need people who are comfortable with being status quo, with people who just aspire to be comfortable, aspire to not worry about whatever disrupting. That's great. It's a balance in society. So we can't like all be aspiring to disrupt because then the whole ecosystem would kind of collapse type of thing. But I just find it interesting how someone like the year just started and that person already just threw in all the chips and all the cards and was like, it's like I'm like already tired. So if you're already tired on this 6th or 7th, 5th day of the year or 4th day, because I think it was yesterday, it's like, what does that tell about who you'll be in like 5 years from now? It's like you have to have that sense of accountability. Yeah. And then also the whole happiness equation, people aspire to be happy. People aspire to achieve happiness. I think that's also a very fading, a very bad thing to pursue because happiness to me is not an incessant state, a perpetual state of just bliss and joy. Just like you said, it's ups and downs, right? So everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to pursue happiness at any cost. So then, you can have like addictions and, toxic relationships. It's like they're willing to like put themselves in hell to acquire happiness. And that's the whole irony behind it all. It's like people aren't willing to put themselves through hell to acquire like purpose, for example, or to pursue purpose, but they'll put themselves through hell to pursue this fading, delusional sense of just something that has been marketed to us, and we're being primed by TV and primed by companies. It's like, oh, like be happy, like don't worry, be happy, and music, and and like it's addicting, like it's addicting. So you try it once and you do something that makes you happy, and then you just you chase that thing. But at the end of the day, it's looking at it from a macro perspective and thinking to yourself, okay, so this may not make me happy, but it makes everybody else around me happy. So then you're able to like kind of like sacrifice yourself a little bit and then put your ego aside and say, all right, if I'm willing to work 19 hours a day to make this movement worldwide and sacrifice my mental health, my physical health, and go through these very dark moments of my life and these phases, these ups and downs, to make other people realize that, they can also do something similar and they can be happy or whatever, that's temporary. So I don't know if I'm making any sense. It's like your like dark moments and your temporary moments of sacrifices will benefit in a more like longer, substantial form of time.
I think it's about like giving yourself something sustainable to hold on to.
Yeah,
right? And putting all your fulfillment, or putting the things that fulfill you in the control of other people, whether that's in their response to what you do or in their actions, putting your fulfillment in their as their responsibility, making it their responsibility is not sustainable.
No.
I think that's what it comes down to.
And that's what a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Especially in romantic relationships.
Oh,
yeah. And I spoke about this on the last one. It's like, you know, you're like a person's responsible for your happiness and vice versa. Like that's the most selfish thing that you can do, actually.
Yeah.
And so we're actually closing in on 2 hours of podcasting. And it passes very quickly.
Does pass by really
It passes very quickly. Like I like to say that there's like a time warp thing that goes on in this section. It's like you just enter this weird dimension of time.
Yeah.
So
it's good conversation. That's what it's all
it was
about,
awesome, dude.
So.
And so again, just like I told you, I want to do like another episode in the future in the new studio, or maybe even in this one again.
Absolutely.
You know? And basically at the end of every episode, what I tend to ask the guest is to imagine that right now you're walking up onto the world stage. Every single person on this planet, 7 billion people, I think, or maybe 8 billion people, no pressure, 7 or 8 billion people have access to a microphone, to a hearing device that is hooked into that microphone. And the words that you're about to utter into that microphone will be translated into their language and they'll understand it perfectly. And you have this opportunity right now, staring into that camera, no pressure, to convey a message that you want humanity to hear. It could be, I've had people say, follow me on the gram. I've had people say, just say whatever you want. Like it could be a word, it could be a sentence, it could be, and you now have that opportunity to do so.
Wow.
So spotlight's on you, no pressure.
Wow.
The whole world stopped and standing on you right now.
Wow. I think what I would say is when you strip down from everyone everything that society sees them as. So when you take away wealth, when you take away status, when you take away all that stuff, we're all the same. We're all human. We all have the ability to contribute to the human story. The things that make us unique make all of us unique, right? So each one of us is unique in the grand scheme of things. Be authentic.
Yeah.
Own that. I think that's what I would say.
And don't be afraid of the consequences of pursuing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's fantastic. And that's definitely something that people need to hear more about. And I think that that's the reason why I do these at the end. It's I don't try to recap the whole conversation because you can't recap a 2-hour conversation in a few sentences, but it's just getting the essence of like it's like if everybody wants to change the world, like everybody talks about wanting to change the world. So if you had the opportunity, like what would you think that would help the world actually change and move towards a more positive phase? And that would definitely, like if people heard that, especially now at times of war, like that was like in imminent danger.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. But yeah, man. So thank you so much for
Appreciate
coming on. This episode will be available. It's episode 21. Be available on YouTube and iTunes by next weekend.
Perfect.
So then and follow. What's your Instagram handle?
Zain ZAIN _ Elwakil ELWAKIL.
And also follow Zulu Echo
Initiative. Yeah.
Which is through your profile. You can access it there. Yeah. And yeah, so stay tuned for next episode.
Thank you so much, man.
Peace.
Appreciate it.